Bitcoin mining, I realized, was really ultimately an energy business. And if you really understood energy well and can operate really efficient data centers and for the cost and OpEx, you could make money no matter what, as long as Bitcoin wasn't going to zero. And so my entrance into the space was more of a risk mitigated way to get in. And then ever since joining and learning more, I mean, now obviously I'm a Bitcoin maxi and love what Bitcoin stands for. I think the idea that people can truly control their own wealth, you have a true store of value that you're not just getting hyperinflation against. And at this point, I think as it passed the test of time and that adoption across the world. Now, I was talking to someone earlier, and I was like, it's not only going to be a store of value for people living on Earth. When Elon is successful getting us all to Mars, it's literally going to be a store of value for the whole solar system. And so I think that's what's extremely exciting. Hut 8 has become a really big business where we're focusing on energy infrastructure. We own power plants, we own data centers, and we own a massive Bitcoin mining business. And so we thought it was time to spin that business out and give shareholders who want a pure exposure some of the best exposure. And we'll talk about American Bitcoin in a moment. And then for Hut 8 to be that pure energy infrastructure company of the next decade. And so what we see Hut 8 as is a business that is able to really curate an electron, be able to power next generation technologies to push humanity forward.
This episode of the Bitcoin Economy is brought to you in part by Ledn.
Need cash but don't want to sell your Bitcoin? Ledn is the global leader in Bitcoin-backed loans, issuing over 9 billion loans since 2018. And they were the first to offer proof of reserves.
With Ledn, you get custody loans, no credit checks, no monthly payments, and more. Visit ledn.io for more information.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Economy. We're here in Hong Kong with Asher Janud, CEO of Hut 8, and also representative of American Bitcoin. Asher, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Great place, great venue to connect.
So Bitcoin Asia has been, I think, amazing so far. We're half a morning in. There's 20,000 people. There's 5,000 last year. So massive explosion in Bitcoin interest on the Asian continent. So Asher, we're excited to sit down with you today. We'd love to kind of get a background a little bit on your Bitcoin story. You're obviously, I would say, famous in the industry for, being the CEO of Hut 8, but let's also weave into American Bitcoin. Like, what are you guys doing there? How are you accumulating? But first, I want to kind of start out, why do you even care about Bitcoin? Why is it important to you? What makes you passionate about putting your career into that?
So I actually joined the ecosystem, I would say, from a kind of a non-traditional, more contrarian route. When we started a company called US Bitcoin Corp that merged into Hut 8, and then I became CEO afterwards, I was actually nervous starting a crypto company, right? And I think the background was I'd come from much more traditional businesses, and I was telling Mike, my co-founder, I'm like, I don't know if I want to go into the crypto space. And when we dove deeper, I actually found a different way in entering the ecosystem where Bitcoin mining, I realized, was really ultimately an energy business. And if you really understood energy well and can operate really efficient data centers and for the cost and OpEx, you could make money no matter what, as long as Bitcoin wasn't going to zero. And so my entrance into the space was more of a risk mitigated way to get in. And then ever since joining and learning more, I mean, now obviously I'm a Bitcoin maxi and love what Bitcoin stands for. I think the idea that people can truly control their own wealth, you have a true store of value that you're not just getting hyperinflation against. And at this point, I think as it passed the test of time and that adoption across the world. Now, I was talking to someone earlier, and I was like, it's not only going to be a store of value for people living on Earth. When Elon is successful getting us all to Mars, it's literally going to be a store of value for the whole solar system. And so I think that's what's extremely exciting. Hut 8 has become a really big business where we're focusing on energy infrastructure. We own power plants, we own data centers, and we own a massive Bitcoin mining business. And so we thought it was time to spin that business out and give shareholders who want a pure exposure some of the best exposure. And we'll talk about American Bitcoin in a moment. And then for Hut 8 to be that pure energy infrastructure company of the next decade. And so what we see Hut 8 as is a business that is able to really curate an electron, be able to power next generation technologies to push humanity forward. And so whether that be Bitcoin and securitizing the Bitcoin blockchain, whether that be AI compute and or any other advanced technologies, is really being at that intersection of energy and technology. And today I'm also the executive chairman of American Bitcoin. And the idea there is, look, shareholders bought mining companies and bought treasury companies, I think, for a very similar reason. It's, can I get a yield and can I get a levered exposure to the underlying asset? Otherwise, I would just buy Bitcoin or buy an ETF. And I think due to how these companies have been structured, we thought that you could actually make the best of both worlds and create a Bitcoin accumulation vehicle. And when it's the right time to invest in mining, you can start mining Bitcoin at a 50% discount to buying it at the market, but it's not always the right time to invest in mining. And then at this other time is when capital is cheap to raise to buy Bitcoin. That's great. If you could take on cheap dollars and buy Bitcoin at a higher appreciating asset, that's amazing. Capital is not always cheap either. So the ability to ebb and flow between these different strategies and be able to say, we'll buy Bitcoin at the market if we have really cheap cost of capital, and we'll mine Bitcoin at a 50% discount if we have really strong fundamentals. We thought that that was a winning strategy. And obviously Eric Trump did as well, and Donald Trump Jr. And so we came together and formed American Bitcoin from Hut 8's business. And something I was telling someone earlier today as well is, so we merged into Hut 8 and then I became CEO. I found out recently Hut 8 was actually the first public company to own Bitcoin on the balance sheet as a business. And so that's super exciting as well. Yeah, it's a big, I haven't shared that with anyone. I found that out recently for some of the early founders of Hut 8.
So super fascinating on the side of how you've evolved. And we've been privy to the conversation with a lot of investors where either capital's locked up in an IRA or they're in an international market where they can't actually buy Bitcoin directly. And so a lot of them, Bitcoin mining stocks have been that exposure that they're looking for. But then now you have all of these Bitcoin treasury companies and you have everything that Michael Saylor's doing with financial engineering with his preferred stocks and, raising debt. And big investors are now, I think it's super fascinating that you're switching into like, hey, this is what the market is telling us. This is what investors can wrap their heads around and simplifying it. So instead of thinking of Bitcoin mining as a very complex investment, you're stripping out American Bitcoin. So it's like, hey, here's your pure play, just invest in this. And then you can continue operating on the mining business as itself. Before we get into American Bitcoin specifically, we'd love to follow up question on Hut 8 and exposure to, compute, AI. It's obviously been a big interest for coin mining companies. What's been Hut 8's foray into the space?
So the easiest way to think about both businesses is Hut 8 is long energy, American Bitcoin is long Bitcoin. That is the fundamental kind of thesis of both businesses. At Hut 8, we believe that the demand on energy will only increase as technologies continue to progress. And if you think about kind of the evolution of mankind, we've only ever increased in our consumption of energy to power all of these new innovations, technologies that have kind of pushed us forward in the world. And so at Hut 8, it's really understanding the energy markets deeply to be able to power these next generation technologies and give them the power that they need in order to push forward whatever innovations that they're building. And so I think the common denominator of all exciting things, whether it be Bitcoin and the blockchain, whether it be AI compute, whether it be robotics manufacturing, they all consume a lot of power. And so at Hut 8, we'll be that common denominator and we'll create campuses that push these technologies forward.
What if you could lower your tax bill and stack Bitcoin at the same time? Well, now you can with Blockware. New tax guidelines from the Big Beautiful Bill will allow American miners to write off 100% of the cost of their mining hardware for a single tax year. That's right, 100%. Blockware's mining as a service allows you to do everything from securing the miners to sourcing low cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. You get to stack Bitcoin at a discount every single day while also saving for the upcoming tax season. Get started today by going to mining.blockwaresolutions.com/TBE. Again, that's mining.blockwaresolutions.com/TBE. Now back to the interview.
So Eric Trump is a large headline speaker for the conference. And getting back into American Bitcoin, what's been the experience from really start to where we are now with working with the Trump family, starting American Bitcoin? And this is obviously like new territory for a U.S. presidential family getting involved in a Bitcoin business, putting their name attached to it. Tell us about the experience.
American Bitcoin is going to be one of the best Bitcoin accumulations and exposure to Bitcoin. And we're building America's Bitcoin backbone through the mining business that we have. When we took a step back and said, how do we build the best Bitcoin accumulation business? And what does that actually mean? If we were shareholders ourselves, I think I probably know more about mining than the majority of the earth, right? And understand what's good about it, what's bad about it, where companies have gone right, where companies have gone wrong. And I think a lot of what we've seen in mining businesses is people have chased this idea of let's be the largest and have compromised on fundamental economics. People have tried to vertically integrate, but then they start investing in real estate assets and power assets and substations that are a much lower yielding asset class. And so when we formed American Bitcoin, we said, okay, how do we make the best mining business? Let's have that partnership with Hut 8, where Hut 8 can be long infrastructure. It can have a much longer perspective on return. And American Bitcoin has a much faster return on the ASICs that they buy. And the real barometer should be when you buy an ASIC chip, how many Bitcoin could you have bought? And then when you retire that ASIC chip, how many Bitcoin did you mine? And are you net positive or negative? And so American Bitcoin is very Bitcoin denominated of how we think about things. And when we think about growth, it's not about how much exahash and compute we have. It's not about how many Bitcoin we have on our balance sheet. In my mind, those are vanity metrics. What matters most is what is our Bitcoin per share? If a shareholder owns a share of American Bitcoin, are they increasing in their Bitcoin per share that they own by this kind of active management strategy that we have? Otherwise, they should just buy Bitcoin and not take the risk, right? And so I think that is really, really important because like companies can focus on these vanity metrics and then they lose grasp of like the fundamental economics that really matter. And we really just stepped back and said, look, if we wanted an ideal company where we can get a Bitcoin exposure, what does that company look and feel like? How is it structured? And that's how we formed American Bitcoin.
So Asher, as we're wrapping up, what are the best ways, to follow you guys and what you're doing? What are you guys like looking forward to? Kind of like what's next for American Bitcoin? There's a lot of treasury companies, so we're always excited to be like, hey, who do we need to be like getting out of all this noise and then listen to the signal of like who's really building, who has a good hurdle rate, like you mentioned, of outperforming Bitcoin itself.
If you want to follow us on socials, Instagram, Twitter, ABTC will be the handle. We're moving from American BTC to ABTC. We hope to be publicly listed in very short order. And so I think people will see a lot more about us. We've been pretty stealth since we launched and haven't really shared much about our process, and excited to really show the world what we've done in the last couple of months and where we're heading as soon as we go public.
We're all excited to follow you guys. So follow us on the Bitcoin economy. Also on 21 Rates, we're going to be listening to you guys, certainly on our mining page and also on our Bitcoin treasuries page as well. So Asher, really appreciate you stopping by, and we're going to have a good conference.